next. Sorry, guys. Okay. For those who don't know him, he is a practicing board-certified physician, an Amazon best-selling author, and a passionate advocate of health on his YouTube channel where he has over 300,000 subscribers. Along with his online presence, he is very active in his own community of Camden, Tennessee, where he has been practicing at the Berry Clinic since 2003. Dr. Ken Berry is known for his direct, no-nonsense approach to health and wellness. After signing with Victory Belt Publishing House last year, Dr. Berry is set to release a second edition of his best-selling book, Lies My Doctor Told Me, this year. And he's also in the process of writing another book called Common Sense Keto for Type 2 Diabetes. So stay tuned for the release of that one. Dr. Berry looks forward to working with the real people of the world, as well as continuing his mission to bring an end to obesity and type 2 diabetes epidemic, along with bringing awareness to such issues as thyroid health and hormone optimization. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Ken Berry.
Welcome to my old stomping grounds, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. It's good to be back. I had good memories of Murfreesboro and then a few nights I don't remember. But I'm sure they were good too. So we're gonna do my presentation. Is that what we're doing now? Okay. Hey guys, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I want to see some hands. Who did not come from Tennessee today? Look around the room. Now, how many of you have traveled, as far as you traveled today, to attend a Weight Watchers event? You get me? Keto's the real deal. This is more than just a crash diet, a quick weight loss diet. This is a way of eating, and who does this? Nobody does this. Nobody travels for hours to talk about a diet, unless it is the proper human diet that we all together, as a group, as a family, a keto family, we're rediscovering together what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat, because we've been so bamboozled and bullshitted for so many years so that somebody can make $1 million here or $1 billion there, that now we're like, well, I don't even know what we're supposed to eat. We're so confused we don't even know what to feed our cats. Right? Cats are canines. They are felines. They are carnivores. And people trying to give their cats carrots because it's mean to kill a mouse. Think about that. We're so confused when it comes to how to feed this mammal body. But we're rediscovering it, aren't we? And we're doing it together, and that's pretty cool. Okay, am I doing slides, Marty? Is that what we're doing now? Okay, let's go. So I'm going to talk during this section about what's wrong with your doctor. That's what we're going to talk about. Do I have a clicker? No. Oh, that's bad. Okay. And so how am I going to go? Marty? There's another step. There's something else. I do computer a little bit, but okay, now how am I going to go from slide to slide? Yeah.
Going to slideshow.
The little presentation mode.
Where's Nisha?
We'll let the PowerPoint expert do it. Yes. Ready? I'm ready. Yes. Oh. Yes. Oh. That's it? Okay, and then I'm going to, right, and then how do I toggle? Here? Either one, okay. Got it. Okay. All right, here we go, guys. You ready? I'm ready now. Okay. So why does your doctor say stupid stuff? And what you can do about it? Has anybody heard this before? If so, you can give it, and I'll sit down with Nisha. Okay. So doctors have been experts about the care and feeding of human beings for many decades now, right? A century or two. And all during that time, doctors have told their patients stupid stuff, right? And so here's an old ad, and this is legit. Every picture in here is real. This is an old ad from a magazine. Doctor approved cocaine drops for your baby's teething pain. Not a joke. And so back then, and what I'm trying to really get you to understand is there's this thing in medicine that Dr. Weston's very familiar with called standard of care. Right? And so if I, as me, could travel back in time and go to the town and say, hey, you know, cocaine's very addictive. And it could potentially cause fatal heart arrhythmias in the babies. Probably that's stupid to give your baby cocaine. You understand? I would be the guy who's wrong. Because the community standard of care, every doctor in that town would be like, shut up, dude, what are you talking about? Everybody does this, it's fine. What research is it based on? It's irrelevant. We all do it. Shut up. That's kind of how medicine works. And so that's part of what's wrong with your doctor. Now, I don't know everything that's wrong with your doctor, but this is one of the things that hampers doctors. It's called standard of care or community standard of care. And if a doctor strays too much outside of that, he can get in trouble. Either with the local medical society or the state medical board. Here's another one, right? It used to, regardless of whether you had a sore throat or syphilis, you needed to be bled. You needed leeches. And that was standard of care for many decades in the past. Okay? Now, used to, for a thankfully brief period of time, if a young boy was too rambunctious, wouldn't sit still, wouldn't shut up, there was this miraculous medical procedure called a lobotomy. And it would magically make your boy sit still and be quiet for the rest of his life. He would never again be himself. He would never again be anybody. But he would sit still and be quiet. And for a few years, this was standard of care. And again, if I had went back in time to this community and said, what the hell are you doing? You're destroying these children. Their personality's gone forever. They are no longer who they were. I would have been run out of town. My medical license would have been pulled. They would have said, you're a quack, you're a kook, you're an idiot. Shut up. But we all know now, looking back, this was barbaric and ridiculous, right? So there are these laws of human nature that make doctors do what they do. Just like the laws of human nature make you do what you do. And I'm going to go through a few of them and how they apply to your doctor. Who's heard of the law of the instrument? Anybody heard of that? Yeah, Marty has. So basically this says, if you're a carpenter and all you've got is a hammer, then everything you need to work on is going to look like a nail to you. That's human nature, right? If you only have something a crowbar, then you're going to try to pry everything because that's the only tool you have. And so if you're a modern doctor and the only tool you have is a prescription pad, what are you going to use? When somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm pre-diabetic and overweight, can you help me? I'm going to pull out my hammer because that's all I know how to do, right? That applies to you, and it applies to doctors too. And so, in case you guys haven't already figured it out, doctors are just regular people who went to school for a long time. All the laws of human nature apply. All the weaknesses of humans applies. All the strengths of humans apply. So, the next is called the law of remuneration. And this is, some people confuse this with bribery. It's not that, okay? Let's say that I found out tomorrow that keto didn't really work and was dangerous. Right? Do you see how it would be really difficult for me to say, hey guys, you see that? So there's a law of human nature that if your paycheck depends on you believing or not believing something, you're going to believe that. Because that's, I mean, you know, it would be very difficult if I told my pilot with FedEx in here, oh, dude, the laws of aerodynamics, they're bogus, dude. He'd be like, no, that's how I make my paycheck. I fly a plane. So obviously they work. His paycheck depends on believing that plane, even though it's heavier than air, he can make it lighter than air if he does everything just right. His paycheck depends on that. And so many doctors, many pharmaceutical houses, many big food manufacturers, their paycheck depends on believing what they currently believe. And so when somebody like you gets in their face, it makes them very, very uncomfortable. And there are many doctors sitting quietly on their little doctor stool in their office, and they know keto works. But they also know that their livelihood can be in danger if they speak too loudly about it. Does that make sense? Next is the law of authority. We all tend to look up to people, right? All of us. From the highest to the high to the lowest to the low, we look up to people. And when they say something, we tend to believe them. And so in medical school, you remember this, Eric, the longer the white coat, the more important the physician you were. And so when you first start as a medical student, your white coat's about coming to, it looks like a vest. Right? Then you go through med school, and then when you're an intern, you get to maybe here, right? And then when you finish residency, then you get a longer white coat. But if you become a professor, or you go to Harvard and you start publishing papers, some of these guys look like Princess Diana. Their coats, right? Just streaming along behind them. And so other doctors, you can understand, I'm wearing a little white vest. And when my attending physician says, no, you have to give vitamin D drops to breastfed babies because mothers don't make vitamin D in their breast milk. Now, just a common sense blue-collar worker would go, wait a minute, how come we aren't extinct? How come we didn't all die of rickets and break our femur and die? What are you talking about? But that guy's white coat was much longer than mine, and so I went, got it, I'll write the vitamin D drops for the babies. And only years later did I go back and research that. That's one of the very first lies that I ever went, what? That can't be right. How's that makes no ancestral sense at all. But in the heat of that moment, I couldn't say, wait a minute, are you a dumbass? That would have been very bad for my medical training in my career, and so I had to just go, okay, that makes no sense at all, but I'll write the vitamin D drops. That is the law of authority. And this guy, anybody know who this is? Who is that? Ansel Keys. And this guy, his white coat, man, he had like a couple of little guys carrying his train, right? And even though he wasn't a medical doctor, a lot of people think he was, but he wasn't. But he was a researcher, and he published a 7-country study that said, hey, cholesterol's bad for you. Don't eat saturated fat. That's the guy right there. And he was such an authority figure, he carried himself like, what, are you questioning me? Right? And so everybody's like, okay, yeah, he's right. And that was it. Based on completely fallacious research for the last 60 years, this guy is the whole reason we have Lipitor and Zocor and Crestor. That's him. If not for him, none of that stuff would exist, and we'd all have been eating bacon all those years. This is one of my favorites. Not just because there's a monkey. The law of the shortcut. So, the reason that we've basically taken over the world as a species is because we're very smart, right? And if we can see a quicker way to get from here to there, I'm not going to jump, I might twist my ankle and take the stairs. Most animals can't do that. And so that's the law of the shortcut. Humans are great at this. And it's a great tool unless you misuse it, right? And then you start taking shortcuts that bypass things. And so when you say, oh, your total cholesterol's high, therefore you're at risk of a heart attack, therefore you need Zocor. There's a shortcut in there. Did you hear it? We assume that total cholesterol is a marker for increased risk of heart attack, but that's never really been proven, ever. Did you know that?
Yep.
You can't print a research study that shows definitively high cholesterol will increase your risk of heart attack. It doesn't exist. But yet all doctors think they know that's the truth because they took the shortcut. Okay? Everybody in here probably knows that association does not prove causation, right? Just because there are a lot of firemen in the yard of a house that's ablaze does not mean the firemen caused the fire, right? They're there to put the fire out. But if every time you drove by a burning house, you're like, see, there's those damn firemen again. I'm telling you, they're behind it. That is basically, and so this is a very good instinctual tool to use, because when you're out in the wild, you have to make snap judgments, and you have to go, every time I see that lion, a mammal dies. I'm going to avoid him. See, that's great. That's a great way to use this rule. But when we get into the more esoteric, the more intellectual parts of life, you can't just say, well, every time Nicolas Cage has a new movie, more people drown in their swimming pools. So we need to ban him from making any more movies. You guys have all heard that association before, right? And so that's not good research. That's whether it's epidemiology or bench research or medical research, that's not how you do it. But so many of the nutrition authorities, like Willits, you've heard of this guy, you've heard of Eat Lancet, you've heard of all these things. This is what they're doing. They're basically doing association studies, saying, yeah, these two things are associated, but then saying, oh, well, therefore, this caused that. Cannot do that. That breaks the laws of logic. That breaks every law of research and the scientific method, as a matter of fact. But it happens every single day by very smart men and women with very long white coats. They make this mistake every day. Sometimes because their paycheck depends on it. Sometimes because their reputation depends on it. Sometimes just, I don't even know why they do it. So the standard of care we already talked about. If a community of medical doctors is doing a certain thing, no matter how stupid, no matter how dangerous, it is the standard of care. And if you venture too far outside that, you can get in trouble even if you know the answer. So if I went back and said, guys, lobotomies are torture. They're a war crime. They're a crime against humanity. I would have lost my license at that time in history. See that? See how that? And so my point is when you come at doctors with keto, like, dude, I've lost 80 pounds. My A1C went from 14 down to 5.5. He's got his standard of care. He's got the ADA guidelines. He's got the AHA guidelines. He's got the medical board. He's got the local medical society. He's got his buddies in the doctor break room. He's got a lot of pressure to uphold that standard of care. And so when he sees one story like yours, it's easy for him to ignore it. But when he sees 10 stories, it's harder. And then when he sees 100 stories, he's like, I got to Google this keto thing. There's something here. So a big lie is much easier to believe than a little lie, right? And Hitler used this to great advantage in Nazi Germany. And the Time magazine cover on the left, how many people do you think that influenced? I mean, what's the unspoken message there? Right? But then all of a sudden, a few years later, and this is also, I know, a great source of confusion for patients. And people say, well, I don't even know what to do. Because one year y'all say, don't eat eggs, and next year you say, eat eggs. And then you say, oh, bacon's bad, now butter's good. I don't even know what to do. Do you realize that that never happens with anything else except food? And it's usually fatty food that we say, oh, it's bad. 20 years later, well, it ain't that bad. 30 years later, that's actually good. It's only with fatty, delicious food do we do this, right? We don't do this with anything else. We never say, oh yeah, jumping off buildings is fine. Then 10 years later, well, no, it's bad for your femur. You shouldn't do that. We never do that. But when it comes to delicious fatty food, we'll say, oh, you shouldn't eat that. And it all goes back to the gluttony and the sloth, right? It all goes back to the religious. It all goes back to the moral. That tastes too good, therefore it must be bad for you. That literally is the logic that all this is based on. And then the echo of the lie. So after I've been in my practice from 2003 until 2006, saying you should join Weight Watchers, you need to join the gym, you need to burn more calories than you lose, or than you eat, which is literally what I used to tell people back when I was an idiot. That lie my lie from those years is still echoing, okay? Because every nurse I worked with heard me say that. And so she took that as gospel because of the law of authority, right? So she's still telling people that problem. She's still telling her husband, quit eating that damn bacon because that's bad for you, right? Or join the gym. And then every mom who had ever been to my office is now telling her children that lie. You see how it keeps echoing and rippling? And that's terrible, but it's also great for us because you can use this echo. There's also an echo of the truth, right? And that's what keto's doing. Somebody outside was talking about the ripples, right? How it just keeps moving and keeps growing, and you affect somebody who I've never met, but now they know about keto. Thanks to you, thanks to me. Does that make sense? And so you can actually use this ripple effect, the echo of the truth, just as powerfully as the echo of the lie can cause damage. And I'm still trying to undo the damage that I did my first 3 years of practice, and I apologize for that every time I have a chance because I didn't know better, but that's still no excuse because I should have known better. So if something's less bad, then it must be good, right? This is how media gets it wrong. And so, everybody knows doctors used to recommend cigarette smoking, and they would pick a particular brand. That was standard of care. So if I went back in time and said, smoking causes lung cancer, dummy, I'd have been thrown out of the medical society. I would not have been welcome in the doctor's lounge. That would have happened, right? So if I do a study of unfiltered cigarettes versus filtered cigarettes, and say, oh, look, they had a 10% less risk of cancer, which is not true, by the way, but just say, then I published that little study in some little journal. And then somebody said, oh, look at that. Filtered cigarettes are less bad than unfiltered. Okay, cool. Then when the news gets a hold of it, the New York Times or CNN, how are they going to announce that? Filtered cigarettes are safer than unfiltered. That's how they'll word it. Now, what do you hear? Filtered cigarettes are safe. That's exactly right. Did anybody lie along that chain? It's almost like the whisper game in first grade, right? I printed my research. I was honest. Then the people who interpreted it, they were pretty honest. They used different wording, but they still said basically the same thing. And then it was one more step until filtered cigarettes are safe. And that's the way that the media gets these things so wrong. When they come out with a new epidemiological study showing, oh, low-carb diets, you die sooner. That's what's happened here, because the actual research doesn't show that at all. They didn't even study people who eat truly low-carb. They're not even in the study. I see some heads nodding. You guys have seen the study, yeah. But by the time it makes it to the media, they're not nutritionists. They know nothing about statistics. They're going to say, oh, you die sooner if you eat low-carb, even though that wasn't even studied in the study. Pretty amazing some of the crap us human beings can come up with, huh? And then repetition. The more you repeat a lie, the more people believe it. You just keep repeating it. And so you see Dr. Michael Greger, the vegetarian who looks like he needs to be on IV nutrition. Looks like that I don't even know. Oh, poor fella, I feel so bad for him. But he's on Instagram and Twitter all the time, talking about how he reads all the nutrition literature every year so you don't have to, and he's going to tell you what to eat. And guess what? It's plants. Who knows who this is? One of my favorite doctors in the history of medicine. Who is it, Eric? Semmelweis. Okay, so let me tell you the story of this. You'll see the fear in doctors. That's why I'm telling you this. You'll understand your doctor's hesitancy to say, okay, I've had 150 patients reverse their type 2 diabetes with keto, but I'm still afraid to talk about it. This guy was a young doctor in Vienna, and there were 2 hospitals in Vienna. There was a hospital where you could have babies that was run by the doctors and the medical students. There was another hospital for poor people that you were delivered by a midwife. Okay? What they found was that the incident of childbed fever, where the mom would get sick, have a fever, and die, was way higher in the doctor's hospital. It almost never happened in the midwife hospital. And so this young doctor, I mean, look at him. He's not a kook. Look at his little bow tie. Look at him. He's in the clique, right? He is a doctor. He is a young doctor, very intelligent. I mean, look at that size of that forehead. He's a smart guy, right? He did a little study, and he said, you know, I think our hands are dirty because at the doctor hospital, they would go and do autopsies on dead people. And then they would go straight from there to delivering babies. And they didn't wash their hands. Because first of all, doctors are gentlemen, and they're never dirty by definition because they're a gentleman. Not kidding, that's literally what they believed. And secondly, the germ theory of disease hadn't been invented yet. They didn't know anything about bacteria and viruses and all that. They had no idea. And so he did a little study where he had doctors or students wash their hands in this noxious little carbolic acid solution. Basically, they washed their hands before they went and delivered babies. And the incidence of childbed fever plummeted. And so he's like, oh my God, I've discovered something amazing. And so he writes it up like he's supposed to. He publishes it. And everybody yawns because they're all gentlemen. They're not dirty. They're not going to wash their hands. Literally, that would be offensive. To tell a doctor back then, you need to wash your hands, dude. You just had your hands in a dead body. You're nasty. Go wash your hands. That would be very confrontational and offensive. And they would be offended. They'd probably want to go outside and shoot you or something. So, poor Semmelweis, even though he had basically saved millions of women's lives. You understand what a hero he is. You get that? Like, he literally had discovered almost the cure for cancer here. It's like, oh my God, wash your hands and the women don't die. Then the poor babies are not orphans. He was chastised, he was ignored, he was ridiculed, he was stripped of his entire reputation. Okay? He wound up being committed as insane. That's how powerful the standard of care is that doctors have to fight against, okay? During the intake, going into the insane asylum, he was beat up by the attendants. One of his wounds got infected, most likely by the very same bacteria that was killing all the women. 2 or 3 days later, he died in his cell of the infection. Now, do you understand the pressure that's on doctors? Because most of us know, we at least sort of know the story of Semmelweis, right? And we now herald him as a hero. But he was destroyed as a doctor because he went against standard of care. Pretty powerful story. And so give your doctor a little bit of slack. Not a lot, just a little. Because it's a big deal. So, were you practicing, Westman, when Valium was considered non-habit forming and completely fine to give to every woman in America 3 times a day? There was a time that was completely acceptable, and the drug reps actually told doctors it's not habit forming at all. No, because the only other thing they had then was like the barbiturates, which were definitely habit forming. And so the benzodiazepines were marketed as non-habit forming. And so the drug rep, the cute little with his tie over his skirt, would say, hey, you can give this to everybody. Every woman who's menopausal, every woman who doesn't like the fact that she just has to cook the bacon and never gets to go get actually have a career and stuff. Back in those days, Valium 3 times a day made it all better. That was standard of care. If I went back in time, blah, 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 you get it, right? They would have been like, what are you talking about, Barry? Everybody knows it's not habit forming. Based on no research, by the way. Okay? So, what are we going to do about this? What can we do? You guys already got it figured out. You guys are already driving from other states to strengthen the bonds of your keto family. And because we know we're right? We're all Semmelweis. Sitting there in your seat, me standing here. We are Semmelweis.
Amen.
And so that's why it feels like such a fight sometimes. Because you're fighting the same fight that Semmelweis fought. That's pretty impressive. So what can you do specifically? Many of you guys are already doing this. Let me go through this quickly. So has anybody tried to convert your mom or dad to keto? How'd that go? Yeah. So there's this law of human nature called the powdered butt syndrome. If anybody's ever changed your nappy and powdered your naked little baby butt, then it doesn't matter if you're a brain surgeon and a rocket scientist, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. That's just human nature, right? Because they've seen you pick your nose, they've seen you throw up, they've seen you poop your pants. You don't know what you're talking about, and that's the law you're fighting against. And the only way to fight against that is to lead by quiet example and to let them see your life and go, wait a minute, what are you doing? That's where the power's at with this. But you can't just go and preach to some people who are your authorities, because they're not going to listen to you. You gotta lead by example. And so you, first of all, got to learn, which you guys are here today to do that. You got to learn by watching videos. You got to learn by joining a Facebook group. You got to asking questions. Please don't be shy. Ask questions. Because all these people are here, they would love to help you. I would love to help you. Once you have the knowledge, then you can apply that to your life and then maybe even change your doctrine. So you lead by quiet example. You fix yourself. That's number one. Fix yourself, right? If you're on the airplane that's going down, you put your oxygen mask on first. There's a reason for that. It's not selfishness. When you fix yourself, you set an example that nobody can ignore. Nobody can ignore the fact that the guy I was talking to outside has lost 75 pounds. You can't ignore that. You can't not see that. Obviously, he is a different human now. He feels better, he looks better, his labs are better. You can't ignore that. And so that's the kind of thing that people have trouble arguing with. Otherwise, it's just your opinion. Share your story, like so many of you guys are doing. Do not be shy about that. I had a lady the other day I was talking to who had a severe eating disorder. She was anorexic, okay? And she came to keto and intermittent fasting, and she's completely fixed that and reversed that. She has no eating disorder now. And I said, I know it's uncomfortable for you to talk about that. She's like, yeah, I don't know if I can do that. And I said, but you understand there are thousands of women who need to hear your story. And so I don't know what she's done with that. She said, I'll think about it. I don't know, that's a lot. I said, oh, I get it, but just think about it. And so hopefully one day we'll see her YouTube channel or her Facebook page, because that's what it takes. You got to share your story, and actually the more embarrassing, the better, because people are going to hear that and they're like, wait, what? What did she just say? He just said what? Yeah, very powerful. And then you can also do this weird thing called teaching your doctor. How many people have their doctors on board with keto now? How many? Yeah. Some of you are looking at that hand going, I can't believe that. How do they do that? Just like I said earlier, if you're the first person that turns your life around with keto and you tell your doctor, he's going to think you're a kook. That's just how doctors think. But when you're the 10th person, or the 20th, or the 30th, or the 40th, he's going to go home, instead of sitting down in his recliner and watching Fox News, he's going to Google keto. And he's going to read and watch some videos, and then he's on board. Then you just change your doctor. And do you understand the power of that? If you change your doctor, what does that do? What's the ripple of that? How many patients does he have? How many type 2 diabetics does he have? How many lives did you just affect by changing your doctor? You get that? See the power that you guys have? You have that. Right now, sitting there, you have that power. That's pretty amazing. I love that. Word of mouth, obviously. Lead by example. Tell people your story. Social media is the thing that's going to make keto the proper human diet again. Okay? Dr. Robert Atkins, you've heard of him, right? He didn't have any social media. He was also a little bit on the arrogant side. Is that right, Eric? A little bit arrogant. Yeah. And so a lot of people didn't just like him as a person. He wasn't very personable. He wasn't like a backslapper and a handshaker. He was a little bit boisterous. And so he didn't have social media, so he couldn't share this. And so, the Atkins diet grew huge without social media. You imagine what keto's going to do in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? It's going to be the proper human diet. Because you cannot ignore every story in this room. Because then that makes you the kook. If you just ignored all these people who've driven all these miles, then you're the kook. If you ignore that at this point. That's the power of social media. Social media gives you a power that most doctors didn't have 20 years ago. Right? And so do not neglect that. Do not be afraid of that. I don't care if you're 82 years old. I had a patient come in the other day. He's been doing keto for about 3 years. He's 87. And he was coming for hospital follow-up. He had wrecked his four-wheeler and broken 4 ribs. And I said, dude, what were you doing? He kind of jokes like, I was showing out for my girlfriend. Right? You get that? That's what I'm talking about. I don't even want to hear, oh, I'm too old, I don't know technology, I don't even want to hear that. I'm 50. Some people consider that old. Right? When Nisha first said, hey, you know what? Why don't you stop bitching at me and make a YouTube video? I thought, I can't do that. I'm an old dog doctor. I'm 48. I can't do that. And so about the 10th time she said that, I'm like, you know what? Fine, Nisha. Fine. I'll make a YouTube video. And you see what that's amounted to. So do not think you're too old. Do not think that your voice does not matter, because it matters. There's my stuff in case you need it. Thanks, guys.